Okay, let's move on now from the gist to setting the purpose and creating a text summary. So the idea of this section is to talk about how to develop a purpose for the students to read, and then talk about how you get students to answer the purpose question by creating a text summary. And as you recall, we talked about the gist being the same as the main idea, the central idea, and the text summary would be different. We use the word summary to describe how you're going to put all the ideas in the text together. So that's the purpose of this section. Just to highlight again how this fits into our overall framework, you can see here that we talk about, in terms of our activity, we're talking about getting the gist individually. We're linking into that, setting the purpose, and doing the text summary as part of those key activities. So to get us started, let's go ahead and watch a little section of a teacher setting the purpose. As you'll see, this is not very long, but it'll give you a sense of what it looks like when a teacher sets the purpose. So I'll step off the screen and you can watch that. So facilitators, well, I guess it was just going to come up. Watch it.
Today we're going to read a text that's called Is Newer Better? And we've been talking about argument, and we've been working on arguments, and this is an argument piece of text that as we read it, you're going to see what the argument is, and we're going to talk about the purpose. So, the purpose question is, what are some arguments for and against upgrading your cell phone?
All right, so presumably you watched the little video there, give you a little sense of what that's about. So let's talk before we talk about how to get the purpose, or how to set the purpose and how to create the text summary. Why is this important? We already got the gist for the individual sections of the text. Well, one reason that it's important to create a text summary is that these texts are, in fact, really difficult. And what the purpose questions allows you to do is to help focus students' attention on the key things in the text. So they're not sort of overwhelmed by the volume of information in the text. They actually have a specific thing to focus on. Second point is that students really often struggle to figure out how to put together a lot of different things in a text, or if there are a lot of complicated ideas, students often struggle to figure out how to link them all together. That's true of all types of students, not just students with disabilities. Setting the purpose question is really helpful because it helps students connect what I'm going to call micro and macro level processes. Micro level processes are sort of section-based or even sentence-based pieces that are sort of the little pieces of the text. And then you put those together to create a macro level understanding of the text, how all of the ideas fit together. What the purpose question does is it takes students from the micro level of the individual gist statements into the macro level, which is the summary of the entire text. So that's really why the purpose question can be super helpful there. Third piece is that setting the purpose is important because if students write a text summary on their own without having gotten the purpose, we often find, without you setting the purpose, we often find students have some or even a lot of times a lot of extraneous information they haven't been able to think carefully about what's most critical, and setting the purpose allows students to do it. So it focuses them on the key ideas in the text. So it makes ultimately those text summaries more precise and more accurate. So how will this happen for students? How will you link this into the lesson? So what will happen is, first, before you start the gists, you'll tell students the purpose question. Then you'll have students do the gists for all of the different sections of the text, and finally, they'll do a text summary. So here's the gist log, and just to kind of show you what this looks like. The purpose question will be here. The students will get the gist for the different sections of the text. There are 5 sections written here, but it doesn't have to be 5 sections. And finally, there's a space for the text summary at the bottom. So when students work through this, this is the order of things that are going to happen. It is important to get back to the text summary. It feels like often like we did the gist, like don't students get it? It's really helpful to create that macro level understanding to get to the point of being able to write a text summary. So those are the things that are going to occur in a lesson. Let's talk about each of those in turn. So first, the purpose question. The big thing here is you have to figure out what the purpose question is going to be. So here's some guidelines for you for how to develop a purpose question. The first thing you want to do is to write gist statements for each of the sections in the text. This is what you're going to do as part of your planning. Then choose the most important ones from all of those, and finally take those and turn those gist statement ideas into the questions that you will then use to create a single purpose question. So why would we start with writing the gist statements? Well, because it can be annoying. Like, we're basically asking you to get the main idea for all the sections yourselves before you actually do that with the students. So why is that important? Well, first, it's going to help you figure out what's really critical in the text so that when you write your purpose question, it will be the right one. It'll be about the kind of key ideas. Second, it allows you to think about like where you want to guide students to get to, and when you're looking at the gist statements they come up with, you can sort of evaluate them, and that gives you sort of an answer key for that, not just in terms of evaluating, but also then deciding how you're going to support the students in terms of their gists. So what I've got here on the next slide is the gist statements that I've come up with for the text, that you hopefully came up with for a text. Hopefully your 3 and 4 are pretty similar to the ones that I've written here on the screen. So those are the gist statements that we've written. So we've done step 1 of developing the purpose question. The second step then is to choose the most important of these gist statements to figure out which of those we're going to focus on. So I'm going to pick I'm going to put here 1 to 3 important points you want your students to learn. What are the key things you want them to get out of the text? So I look at these things. We've got eradicating polio, and the fact that it's stuck in 4 countries. Gates really wanted to do that, but some people doubting, and he finally convinced them, and finally they were almost there to eradicating polio. So what are kind of the key things? Well, the one thing that I eliminated here was this idea that vaccines were the US polio, but it still exists in 4 countries. Obviously, what we're trying to do is eliminate it in those 4 countries, but really the key is this overall point about polio eradication. It isn't so much about these specific 4 countries. So I'm actually going to decide that that's not as important as the other gist statements. So now we've come up with the most important gist statement. We've taken those 3. Now let's take those and turn them into individual questions. So he's determined to eradicate the polio disease from the planet. Okay, so how do we turn that into a question? Well, one question is, what's his goal? Second, he convinced these doubting experts, and so, but they didn't want to do it originally. So here we have, what obstacles has he encountered? What are the things that have been difficult for him? And finally, the polio rates have decreased dramatically, and what question could we come up from that? Well, what has happened as a result of this movement to eradicate polio? Well, those are the questions that we came up with based on our gist statements, okay? And so now can we come up with one single purpose statement to kind of link all those things together? I think that this does an okay job. What does Bill Gates want to do? How has it worked out, right? We haven't exactly mentioned obstacles here. Those kind of get folded into the how it has worked out piece. And I think of all of these things, sort of understanding what happened as a result is really critical. So this, I think, is the right purpose question. How is this helpful? It's going to focus students on the key ideas in the text, what we really need to focus on, what the students will need to write into that text summary, and help them understand, yeah, some things are there, but they're not quite as critical as others, right? And so this is where, remember, I didn't put in the thing about 4 countries. Well, that's appropriate because this question about the overall text doesn't really get to that. And so this helps students focus on other things besides this more detailed part of the text. So how are you going to teach students to do this? So what I just described to you was how you come up with the purpose question. How are you going to teach students? You're going to have it on the gist log, and you're going to tell them explicitly that this is your purpose for reading, and again, you want to write it down on the gist log so students have access to it. So you're going to photocopy the gist log for students each week, and so you are going to write on the gist log like what the purpose question is to help students get ready for the text. And you're going to tell them, this is why we're reading, this is our purpose, and read them the gist question there. Okay, so now we've talked about how to create a purpose question ourselves and then how we're going to teach it to students. Now, as you can well imagine, it is your turn. So now you're going to go to a text on Pokemon Go, which you may be watching this in a year past 2016, but if Pokemon Go has not come back in the cultural pantheon, like basically this is this thing where you could move around the world and Pokemon characters would show up. I've never done it, but apparently it's kind of fun, or it was kind of fun back in 2016. So if you're watching this later, like, yeah, that doesn't exist anymore maybe, but this basically is about something that had occurred related to this Pokemon Go sort of app. And so you get a chance to now figure out how you would develop a purpose question for that text. So it's going to require a little bit of work, because what are you going to do? First, you're going to write the gist statements. Second, you're going to pick the most important 1 to 3 of those. Third, you're going to turn those into questions. And finally, you're going to create one purpose question that links all those together. So have fun doing that. We'll come back together, and then we'll talk about the text summary. So I said we talk about text summary. So here it is, text summary. Let's talk about how to get students to write a text summary. The criteria for writing a text summary is that 1, it synthesizes the gist statements. 2, it's 40 words or less. We give students some more words to do this. And finally, it answers a purpose question. And what this does is it sort of puts everything together. We say synthesize the gist statements so that students aren't just copying them in order, right? We want them to link together, synthesize, gets that higher level of thinking. We're giving them 40 words so they can create a sort of coherent understanding. It might actually be slightly longer than the individual gist statements. But this gives them some words to sort of synthesize everything. And finally, it has to answer that purpose question. So if they're putting in things in the summary that aren't related to that, that's not so ideal. It's not so good. So then we've got thinking about our final push text summary. So here are the gist statements that we came up with, right? And our purpose question, though, was what does Bill Gates want to do and how has it worked out? So remember that we didn't take all of our ideas here, put them into a purpose question. The vaccine, the vaccines ridding polio except in 4 countries, we decided that's not so critical. So our purpose question didn't really involve that specifically. Now I put all that stuff together. And our text summary basically kind of focuses on the key idea of Bill Gates is determined to eradicate polio. Lots of people thought it wouldn't work, but Bill Gates agreed. I should just read this. Bill Gates determined to eradicate polio. Many people thought vaccination difficulties would make eradication impossible, but Gates disagrees. He's increased vaccination efforts around the world. The number of polio cases has dropped dramatically. Now, this is a really nice summary, and the reason is that it is integrated. It is synthesis, right? These things aren't necessarily presented in precisely the same order when I look at my gist statements, because now I've taken everything critical and I've put it all together. This is a really important skill for students to learn. This is where we take our learning that's designed to help all students, and this is really going to push up students. It's going to force the students, even who are highly achieving, to think about how to synthesize better, which makes it really powerful. Now, one thing we want to make sure you understand about this is that the whole idea of this text summary is that this closes out the lesson. This closes out your CALI lesson where you talk about the things that you've been working on with the gist in this particular text, right? And so basically what you're going to do here is you're going to, at the end of the lesson, now that you've done all the gists and you've answered the purpose question, you want to talk about the text summaries that students came up with. And you also want to come up with some, you want to address points of confusion. One thing we've seen over and over again is in the text summaries, you can see that, oh, they got the gist for the individual sections, but the synthesis of it wasn't quite as good. Going from the micro level to the macro level was actually a little bit difficult. So this is how we suggest you sort of end the lesson, is take those text summaries and have a discussion about all of that together. And that discussion will be really powerful in sort of linking the text to other ideas that they've come up with and helping students process the overall macro level understanding of the text. And this gives you an opportunity with addressing points of confusion, not only in the text summary, but just in general about the text. What are things that they didn't quite get? And by the end, basically, the students will have developed a representation of the entire text that will support them in text going forward and make sure that they have a clear understanding of everything they've learned. So, to summarize, looking at our gist log here, so there's the gist log, and just to kind of summarize again the things that you'll see in it, you'll see the purpose question written by you in the box up there and described by the students. You'll have your gist statements. As you know, you'll have the gist statements written, well, in between you're going to have the most important who or what and so on. But basically, we've stripped all that out. So here are your gist statements, the 4 gist statements written here. Very good. And then finally, we have the text summary, which will be written at the bottom of the page. So now we have all the pieces of our entire text, our gist log. All the pieces are put together. We've gone from, as we talked about at the beginning, we set the purpose, we've done our gists, and we come up with a nice text summary. And this kind of encapsulates our entire lesson. So that is the completion of that piece. Now, you're going to have an opportunity with the workbook to go ahead and look again at our Pokemon Go article and talk about the text summary for that part. So I'll stop there and go ahead and do the workbook activity, talk about Pokemon Go. Hopefully you've enjoyed remembering with fondness Pokemon Go. Maybe some of you ran around the country doing that kind of thing. I personally did not. So let's talk past that now. Let's talk about co-teaching, right? So we've discussed that what's really important with co-teaching is to take advantage of the individual skills and the individual time that you all have to do things efficiently, to use co-teaching as a resource. And we talked about different ways that you could do that by working together, dividing things up, or having one person do things. So in terms of setting the purpose, here are some suggestions we have for doing this. that you may have thought of. One, by working together, you basically can do all this at the same time. Maybe you're at home, you guys can Skype about it and talk about it together. Maybe you're just basically sit down at the end of the day and you read the text and you plan that out. That can work really well. Second idea to divide and conquer is one person writes the gist statements, the other person kind of reviews them, and then writes the purpose question for students, so we kind of divide and conquer. And the third option would be for one person to do all the work for 1 week, and then for the next week, somebody else to do it to sort of save time. So there are different ways you could do it, and you have to come up with the ones that work for you. So we asked the question, how could you collaborate effectively to make this setting the purpose piece really efficient for you as a co-teaching team, co-teaching pair? And maybe you'll come up with some other ideas besides the one we have on the screen. Maybe you'll sort of want to synthesize these, put them together. So talk with the facilitator now. What are some ways that you would like to work together to set the purpose efficiently when you're planning?